Who said the Sahel will collapse, and who is waiting for that collapse to act? These are not rhetorical questions. They are urgent, triggered by a recent and very real statement made by Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa. At a security conference in Abuja, he proposed building a wall, yes, a literal fence, along Nigeria's borders, with neighboring countries such as Niger, Cameroon, and Chad, claiming it would stop armed groups from entering. If you're a young African who believes in freedom, who believes in the future of this continent, you probably felt the same jolt I did. While the world is talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area, while our leaders preach free movement and integration, one of the continent's top military officials is calling for physical division, walls, fences, borders that disconnect rather than unite. This video is not about personal attacks. We're not here to point fingers or rant. What we want is a deeper reflection. Why would a top defense official propose such a plan? Why does this wall-building mindset still persist in 21st century Africa? And more importantly, what can we the youth do to reshape that thinking? Let's dive into the core of this conversation. Together we'll analyze this border fence proposal from the lenses of security, economic development, and continental unity. And through that, we will uncover a powerful truth: lasting peace does not come from steel fences, but from trust, cooperation, and a future where young people have real opportunities to live and thrive. When General Christopher Musa suggested erecting border fences around Nigeria to keep out terrorists, he cited examples like Pakistan with Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia with Iraq, countries that have built thousands of kilometers of border walls. On the surface, these comparisons may seem reasonable. Nations under threat build barriers to protect their people. But are those examples truly relevant to the African context? The answer is no. Africa is not the Middle East, and it is certainly not South Asia. Countries like Pakistan or Saudi Arabia operate in very different social, geographical, and historical contexts compared to West African nations such as Nigeria. In this region, many ethnic groups straddle national borders. They share language, traditions, and ancestral roots. A fence here could divide villages, separate families, and cripple local cross-border trade, which is the economic lifeline for millions living near these borders. More importantly, the wall proposal appears to sacrifice a foundational principle of African progress, regional cooperation, and economic integration. At a time when Africa is advancing the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA building walls sends the opposite message. It says we are afraid. We want to isolate ourselves. That message not only affects national morale, but also damages trust among neighboring states. Trust that is essential for tackling transnational threats like terrorism, climate change, and migration. From a security standpoint, physical walls are not comprehensive solutions. In an era where warfare has gone digital with drones, cyber attacks, and insider threats, fences do little to stop sophisticated enemies. Armed groups no longer need to cross the border in traditional ways. They can recruit from within, infiltrate communities, or launch digital strikes. So instead of investing in walls, why not fund early warning systems, border community education, and local reintegration programs? There's also the issue of opportunity cost. Building thousands of kilometers of border fences isn't just logistically complex, it's enormously expensive. Billions of dollars would be funneled into concrete and steel, while hospitals remain under-equipped, schools underfunded, and millions of youth unemployed. Why not redirect that money toward factories or business incubators where young people can work, earn, and contribute meaningfully to society rather than becoming prey to extremist groups? In summary, General Musa's border fence proposal reflects a reactive mindset, understandable but outdated. It stems from fear, but it inadvertently blocks the very things Africa needs most: connectivity, cooperation, and grassroots empowerment. Rather than isolate ourselves behind barriers, Africa must build bridges. We must pursue integration, smart, strategic, and human-centered integration, because in unity lies our greatest strength. Throughout history, fear has often driven humans to build walls around cities, homes, and borders. But in the 21st century, for an African military leader to suggest fencing off an entire country rather than building bridges with neighbors is a clear sign of a mindset stuck in the past. The wall-building mentality is more than a defense tactic. It's a governance model rooted in fear and control rather than trust and cooperation. When General Musa says, "When the Sahel falls, Nigeria will be the next target he's operating on," the assumption that the Sahel's collapse is inevitable, that chaos is destined. But who told him that? And why is his plan based on a pessimistic vision of failure instead of a proactive investment in regional peace and unity? It's hard not to draw parallels between this thinking and that of other conservative leaders around the world, leaders who promote division over dialogue. Many have dubbed General Musa a Black Trump, a sarcastic nickname, but also a warning. African leaders must realize we cannot borrow Western models of fear and isolation and expect them to bring peace to a continent where unity is our strongest weapon. It must also be said, true security doesn't come from isolation. Sustainable security is built through social stability, economic opportunity, and community trust. Picture this: a 3-meter-high wall, thousands of kilometers long, made of concrete and steel. It may deter some armed groups in the short term, but can it stop the frustration of unemployed youth? Can it block the despair of a generation left behind? In the digital age, threats don't need to cross borders physically. Extremists can recruit via social media, spread ideology through smartphones, and radicalize from afar. Can a concrete wall stop a viral video on TikTok spreading extremist views? Clearly not. So the solution lies not in static physical defenses, but in adaptive, intelligent, and multidimensional responses. Most of all, leading through fear signals a lack of faith in your own people. A good soldier protects their nation not only with weapons, but by helping create a society no one wants to attack. A good leader doesn't build walls, they build trust. The wall-building mindset is a backward step, a symptom of facing the 21st century with 20th century strategies. Africa needs visionary leaders, not concrete managers. We need thinkers who see beyond borders, who invest in long-term peace, not short-term barricades. If building fences is not the answer, then what truly leads to peace and stability in Africa? The answer lies in one powerful word: development. Not vague or generic development, but strategic, inclusive growth that creates jobs, empowers young people, and strengthens the continent from within. Let's begin with a simple truth. Most people who join extremist groups aren't born with a desire to fight. They are drawn in by promises of money, of purpose, of belonging offered in a life where no other options exist. A young person with no job, no hope, and no future becomes vulnerable to manipulation. On the other hand, if that same youth has a stable income, clear prospects, and a sense of contribution to society, the appeal of violence quickly fades. That's why instead of spending billions on fences, countries like Nigeria must invest in domestic industries, training centers, and local job creation initiatives. Nigeria, for example, is one of Africa's largest oil producers. But instead of merely exporting crude oil, why not develop oil refineries and petrochemical plants domestically? These facilities would create jobs for engineers, technicians, managers, keeping value and skills within national borders. Equally important is the promotion of regional economic cooperation models. Ghana is renowned for cocoa. Rwanda is becoming a tech hub. Ethiopia has massive agricultural potential. Each nation can become a regional center of excellence, not only supplying local needs, but also offering products, services, and innovation across the continent. Such interdependence turns neighbors into partners. It makes war illogical and peace profitable. Development must also go hand in hand with education and skills training. Beyond technical knowledge, young Africans must learn about civic responsibility, peace-building, and sustainable growth. A generation that is educated and hopeful is the strongest wall we can build, not of concrete, but of intellect, dignity, and shared vision. In short, the real solution to insecurity doesn't lie in barbed wire. It lies in an inclusive economy, an empowering society, and a unifying political strategy. Development is not just desirable, it is urgent. Without it, peace cannot last. And if Africa fails to act today, those fences will not protect us. They will become the walls that imprison our future. If there's one undeniable truth about Africa's future, it's this: young people will decide the destiny of this continent. With more than 60% of the population under the age of 25, Africa holds a vast reservoir of human potential, but also a ticking time bomb if that energy is not guided and empowered. Right now, the role of youth has never been more critical. While military leaders talk of walls, separation, and self-defense, it is young people who must speak of connection, cooperation, and innovation. No one else can reshape the narrative for Africa like its youth who do not accept victimhood, but instead become the architects of a new reality. So what must we Africa's youth do? First, we must liberate ourselves from dependency thinking. We can't wait for old leaders to change. We must become the generation of change makers. If no one builds the opportunity, we must build it ourselves. If no one opens the road, we must create it together. Social media technology and online learning are powerful tools for connecting with knowledge allies and communities across the continent. Second, we must turn connection into action. Sharing content online is a start, but it isn't enough. Let's form study groups, community initiatives, and cross-border startups. A young person in Lagos can collaborate with a peer in Kigali to build an education app. Someone in Accra can team up with a creative in Nairobi to launch a Made in Africa fashion brand. Small actions, when multiplied, create unstoppable movements. Third, we must engage in political life not through violence, but through voice and votes. Change doesn't come by waiting. It comes by speaking up, asking tough questions, demanding transparency, and holding leaders accountable. African youth must learn the art of smart politics, not through extremism, but through relentless civic participation. Finally, young Africans must hold on to hope in Africa. Even when disappointed, even when angry, do not give up on your homeland. If the youth abandon the continent, who will defend the dream of a united, empowered Africa? If not us, then who? It's time we make it clear we don't need walls, we need spaces for creativity. We don't want to be protected by those who don't understand us. We want to be empowered to build our own futures. The future of Africa does not lie in the hands of generals. It lies in the hands, the minds, and the hearts of young people who love, think, and act for change. We've come a long way in this conversation, from a controversial statement by a Nigerian general to a critique of wall-building mentalities, and finally to solutions rooted in unity, development, and youth leadership. But perhaps the most important message we need to affirm today is this: Africa does not need more walls, it needs more vision. Walls do not stop terrorism, especially if terrorism is fueled by injustice, poverty, and despair. A wall won't stop drones. It won't block extremist ideologies from spreading across mobile networks. It can't stop a desperate young person from trying to cross a desert or an ocean in search of hope. If we continue believing that isolating ourselves from the problem is the safest choice, then that mindset itself becomes our biggest threat. And that threat isn't outside our borders, it's in how we see ourselves and our neighbors. The idea of protecting ourselves by shutting others out is a relic of the colonial era, when foreign powers carved Africa into fragments, not to build it, but to divide and control it. Now, as Africa begins to awaken and pursue integration, ideas like border walls are not just outdated, they are an insult to the dreams of unity that millions of young Africans carry in their hearts. We must face the truth. No wall is taller than hatred, and no barrier is stronger than trust between peoples. Real security begins when people no longer want to flee, when they see opportunity, dignity, and a future in their own land. To achieve that, every country, whether it's as large as Nigeria or as small as Lesotho, must change how it thinks. Borders are administrative concepts. Communities are historical truths. You cannot divide people who share language, kinship, and history with fences. You must connect them with infrastructure, with trade, with cultural understanding. Youth have a central role in this. Young people must speak up, not with blind anger, but with clear and courageous action. We must demand transparency, challenge outdated ideas, and propose practical solutions. If one general can hammer nails into concrete, one young entrepreneur can build bridges across nations. If one politician calls for Division 1, youth movement can start a business that unites dozens across borders. In the age of artificial intelligence, global cloud networks, and borderless finance, building walls is the fastest way to remove yourself from the future. Africa can't afford to be a spectator. We must become architects of the game. That only happens when we are strong, united, and innovative enough to lead the game on our terms. Some will say, talking is easy, doing is hard. They're right, but hard doesn't mean impossible. Change starts small, from local communities, scholarship programs, digital literacy initiatives, Pan-African startup collectives. These seeds of action are what defeat fear, destroy division, and tear down both visible and invisible walls. If this message resonates with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video, not for the views, but because every share is a brick in the bridge we're building between young Africans who want a different future. If you believe Africa can be stronger, freer, more united, then you are already part of that future. Let's not let others redraw Africa's map. Let's draw it ourselves with vision, courage, and collaboration. I am African, not just by blood, by birthplace, or by passport, but by soul. I carry the weight of generations who fought, dreamed, and built this continent with bare hands and unshakable hope. I walk the same soil that my ancestors cultivated, the same rivers they fished, the same paths they walked in search of safety, dignity, and meaning. And today, as I watch leaders talk of walls, fear, and separation, I feel a burning need to speak, not as a politician, not as an academic, but as a child of this land who refuses to be silent. A few weeks ago, I heard that Nigeria's top military official proposed building a wall, fences, to seal the borders with Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. His justification: to prevent terrorism, to stop the chaos from spilling over as the Sahel region collapses. He said it with confidence, with finality, as if Africa's future could be secured with concrete and steel. But I ask, who told him that the Sahel will fall? And even if it did, do walls ever stop desperation? Do fences ever solve the real problems? When I heard this proposal, something inside me cracked. Not because I'm shocked, sadly I've heard worse, but because I'm exhausted. Exhausted by the repetition of history, by leaders who look like us, but think like the people who once colonized us. Leaders who speak of protection, but act out of fear. Leaders who respond to complex problems with simplistic solutions, solutions that divide rather than unite. I come from a border town. Let me tell you something, I come from a border town. My cousins live on the other side. We share the same language, the same songs, the same meals. Our border is nothing more than a river you can cross with a small canoe. When the rains come, we help each other build dikes. When there's a wedding, we all attend, no passport required. You want to put a fence between us. Who will you separate, strangers or family? These borders were not made by us. They were drawn with rulers in distant colonial offices by people who neither knew us nor cared. And now, long after those colonialists have left, we still hold on to their lines, as if they define us more than our shared stories do. A wall is not protection, it is separation, it is mistrust. And if we allow fear to be our architect, we will build a continent of cages. What are we so afraid of? I understand the concern. Insecurity is real. Terrorism has taken lives, destabilized villages, forced families to flee. I don't deny that, But what I question is the cause and the cure. Ask a young man who joined a militia why he did it. Chances are he won't say, because I wanted to kill. He'll say, I had nothing else, no job, no school, no future. He was hungry for food, for dignity, for meaning. You can build 100 walls. But if hunger, hopelessness, and humiliation remain inside those walls, then the danger is not outside, it's within. We need to stop treating symptoms and start healing the disease. The real threat to Africa is not people crossing borders. It's corruption crossing ministries. It's inequality crossing generations. It's unemployment crossing every city, every village, every mind. Let's talk about investment. If a government has billions to build fences, why not build factories? Why not fund scholarships? Why not build hospitals that don't turn patients away? Why not invest in young people who are full of ideas, but starved of opportunity? Imagine a different Africa. An Africa where we process our own minerals, grow our own food, make our own medicines. Where the youth aren't just voters, they're innovators, creators, employers. Where we don't wait for aid, but create trade. That Africa is possible. I see it already in the tech hubs of Nairobi, the designers in Dakar, the farmers in Uganda using drones. I see it in WhatsApp groups, in online courses, in virtual collaborations across borders. We are not waiting. We are already building, but we need space. We need freedom. We need systems that support us, not walls that confine us. I am angry, but I am not hopeless. Yes, I'm angry. Angry that some of our leaders see fences as vision. Angry that so many young people have to leave to succeed. Angry that unity is spoken about in speeches, but buried in policies. But I am not hopeless. Because I've met too many brilliant Africans to give up. I've seen too many youth turn scrap into sculpture, problems into products, trauma into tenacity. We are not the problem. We are the solution. We don't need saving, we need a chance. This is a call to every young African reading this. Speak up. Don't let fear silence you. Don't let experience harden you. Be fierce but be focused. Be bold but be wise. Vote, volunteer, build, create, connect. Challenge leaders but also become one. And to those in power who believe that walls will protect us, know this: history will not remember you for how tall your fences were, but for how deeply your people trusted you, for whether you built nations or just managed territories, for whether you lifted your people or left them behind. In the end, I am African. I am not afraid of other Africans. I do not want to live in a fortress. I want to live in a future where borders mean cooperation, not conflict, where difference is celebrated, not feared, where my children can travel across this continent with pride, not paperwork, where Africa is not a problem to be fixed, but a possibility to be fulfilled. No wall will ever hold back the dreams of a people who are ready to rise. We are that people. We are ready. In an era defined by connectivity, collaboration, and technological advancement, the notion of building physical walls to solve complex problems is a deeply regressive one. The recent proposal by Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff General Christopher Musa to construct border fences with neighboring countries such as Niger, Chad, and Cameroon presents a critical moment of reflection for Africa. It forces us to ask essential questions. Are walls the answer to insecurity? Can concrete barriers substitute for trust, development, and vision? And most importantly, what role must Africa's youth play in shaping a better future? The primary lesson this narrative delivers is that fear-driven governance will not lead Africa into prosperity. Building walls may offer a sense of immediate control or protection, but they fail to address the root causes of insecurity, poverty, inequality, marginalization, and hopelessness. As the text powerfully states, a wall is not protection, it is separation, it is mistrust. The impulse to isolate rather than to engage reveals a mindset that is reactive rather than proactive, focused on short-term fixes rather than long-term solutions. The African context is unique. Unlike regions where borders reflect long-standing historical separations, African borders often cut across ethnic groups, cultures and families artificially created during colonial rule, with little regard for local realities. For those who live near these boundaries, borders are not just lines on a map. They are shared rivers, festivals, and kinships. The idea of erecting walls between such communities not only threatens economic and social cohesion, but also undermines the broader goal of continental unity embodied by initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA. The second key lesson centers on the futility of applying outdated security models to modern challenges. In the digital age, threats transcend physical space. Extremists recruit through social media. Propaganda spreads through smartphones. Cyber attacks can destabilize critical infrastructure without a single shot being fired. Walls cannot stop ideologies, nor can they prevent the frustration of unemployed youth who feel invisible in their own nations. Investing in border fences instead of schools, hospitals, and employment opportunities reflects a gross misallocation of priorities. What is truly needed is inclusive development. The essay underscores this by emphasizing the power of economic empowerment in combating extremism. When young people are given opportunities to work, learn, and innovate, they are far less susceptible to radical ideologies. Poverty and lack of purpose are breeding grounds for unrest. On the other hand, self-sufficiency, dignity, and hope are antidotes to violence. Africa does not lack potential. It lacks systems that unlock it. A significant portion of the story draws attention to the role of youth in redefining the future of the continent. With more than 60% of Africa's population under the age of 25, the youth are not just the future, they are the present. Their voices, skills, and innovations are the most valuable assets Africa possesses. Yet they are often excluded from political decision-making and economic planning. The essay calls for a generational shift for young Africans to move from passive observers to active builders of a new Africa. This message is a rallying cry to speak up, to organize, to vote, to start businesses, to connect across borders, and to take ownership of the continent's destiny. It encourages youth to stop waiting for permission and instead create their own paths, whether through entrepreneurship, civic engagement, or technological innovation. Social media, digital tools, and online learning are not just luxuries. They are weapons of change in the hands of a determined generation. Another important lesson is the necessity of political courage. Leaders must rise above fear-based narratives and choose visionary leadership. History will not remember those who built the tallest fences, but those who built trust, opportunity, and unity. Leadership should not be about control through isolation, but about empowerment through inclusion. Africa needs statesmen and women who think in decades, not in election cycles, who build systems, not symbols. Additionally, the story sheds light on the importance of rethinking identity. Being African is not merely a matter of geography or citizenship. It is a commitment to a shared struggle, a collective hope, and a pan-African dream. The narrator's personal reflection, "I am African," not just by blood, by birthplace, or by passport, but by soul, is a call to embrace identity as a responsibility. It is a reminder that we are all stewards of the legacy of those who came before us, and architects of what comes next. This is not just a critique of military policy or political decisions. It is a deeper philosophical and moral reflection on what kind of future Africa deserves. A future where borders do not divide but connect, where difference is celebrated, not feared, where no child is forced to flee their homeland in search of dignity. The narrative also serves as a counter-argument to fatalism. It rejects the idea that collapse is inevitable or that Africa's fate is to be permanently plagued by conflict. Instead, it offers a hopeful, constructive, and empowering vision rooted in action. We are not the problem. We are the solution, it declares. This lesson of agency, of self-determination, is perhaps the most powerful of all. Change is hard, but it is not impossible. It begins with individual action, multiplied across communities and generations. In conclusion, the story presents a powerful critique of isolationist thinking and a passionate defense of a united, empowered Africa. The lessons are clear. Walls are symbols of fear, not strength. Real security comes from development, inclusion, and trust. And the future of the continent lies not in the hands of those who build fences, but in the minds and hearts of those who build bridges. For Africa to truly rise, it must embrace integration, invest in its youth, and replace fear with vision. The time to act is now, not with concrete and barbed wire, but with courage, collaboration, and creativity. The African dream is not behind a wall, it is within us all. The story presents a powerful and deeply emotional perspective on one of Africa's most pressing issues, the future of the continent in the face of insecurity, poor governance, and generational responsibility. As an audience member, I find the narrative both compelling and courageous. It does not shy away from asking difficult questions or confronting uncomfortable truths. Instead, it invites honest dialogue, especially among Africa's youth, about the path the continent should take. The idea of rejecting walls as a solution to systemic problems is particularly resonant. The message is clear: walls may provide a sense of safety, but they do not solve the underlying causes of instability. One of the most impactful aspects of the story is its emphasis on unity over division. The speaker's reflection on growing up in a border town illustrates how artificial and damaging these colonial-era boundaries have been. It highlights how deeply connected people across African borders are culturally and historically. As a viewer, I find this message to be not only touching but also strategically important. True security lies in connection and cooperation, not isolation. The image of shared meals and celebrations across a river-based border serves as a beautiful metaphor for the interconnectedness of African communities. This metaphor reinforces the notion that walls do more harm than good in such contexts. Another strength of the narrative is its clear critique of fear-driven governance. General Musa's proposal to build border fences is presented not as an evil intention, but as a misguided reaction to insecurity. The story challenges the logic behind such a proposal without disrespecting its source. This is an important distinction as it invites discourse rather than division. As an audience member, I appreciate that the story encourages understanding and reflection rather than anger and blame. It calls for leadership that acts out of vision, not out of fear, which is an urgent need across many parts of the continent today. What stands out most is the call to action directed at Africa's youth. The speaker encourages young people not to wait for opportunity, but to create it. This is a powerful message that aligns with the current reality where digital technology innovation and cross-border collaboration offer new possibilities. The narrative doesn't just criticize the current system, it offers a roadmap for change. As a young person, I find this deeply motivating. It reminds me that we are not powerless and that the future of Africa truly lies in our hands. From creating startups to engaging in civic life, the message is that we can and must lead the way forward. The story's tone is both personal and political, which makes it more relatable and effective. By sharing personal experiences, such as the connection with family across the border, the speaker humanizes the political implications of border policies. This is important because it moves the conversation from abstract geopolitics to the real impact on people's lives. As a listener, I felt emotionally connected to the message because it came from someone who lives the reality being described. It is not just theoretical, it is lived experience, and that gives the message great weight. Moreover, the story exposes the false sense of security that physical walls provide. In the digital age, threats are no longer confined by geography. Extremist ideologies, misinformation, and recruitment happen online. A wall cannot stop a viral video or a WhatsApp message. This reality makes the proposal to build a fence seem outdated and ineffective. From a strategic perspective, the story is correct in asserting that investment should go toward education, employment, and social infrastructure rather than concrete and steel. As an audience member, this argument is both logical and economically sound. It challenges governments to reconsider their priorities and rethink what real national security looks like. The story also critiques the way African leaders sometimes adopt foreign policies or frameworks that do not fit the local context. Comparing Nigeria to countries like Pakistan or Saudi Arabia ignores the unique social and historical landscape of West Africa. The narrative makes it clear that Africa must find African solutions to African problems. This is a crucial point. As a viewer, I believe that this emphasis on contextual thinking is essential. We cannot import models of fear and expect them to build peace in a region where integration and cooperation are the key to lasting stability. Another valuable message from the story is the idea that the youth must engage, not only online, but in real-world actions. The call for civic participation, entrepreneurship, and collaboration is timely and necessary. The speaker rightly notes that posting online is not enough. Real change comes from organizing, building, and voting. This message encourages responsibility, initiative, and persistence. As someone who often feels overwhelmed by the scale of Africa's challenges, I find this advice practical and empowering. It shifts the narrative from passive frustration to proactive engagement. The narrative also touches on the importance of identity and self-belief. Declaring I am African is not just a statement of origin, it is a declaration of ownership, pride, and duty. The speaker's repeated affirmation of this identity serves as a rallying cry for others to see themselves as part of a collective future. This is not just a political statement, it is a cultural and spiritual one. It emphasizes that being African means being responsible for the future of the continent. It means refusing to give in to fear, division, or external influence that weakens our collective strength. Finally, the story ends on a note of hope, tempered with realism. It acknowledges the anger and frustration that many young people feel, but insists that these emotions must be channeled into constructive action. The statement, "We are not the problem, we are the solution," is an empowering reminder of the potential that lies within African youth. As an audience member, this ending left a strong impression. It did not deny the hardship, but it also did not allow despair to dominate. Instead, it offered a vision, one that invites every listener to be part of building something greater than themselves. In conclusion, this story is a profound and necessary contribution to Africa's ongoing conversation about its future. It challenges outdated thinking, critiques ineffective policies, and elevates the role of youth as agents of transformation. It speaks to the heart, the mind, and the conscience of every African who believes in the possibility of a better continent. As a member of the audience, I am not only moved, I am inspired. The message is clear: Africa does not need more walls. It needs more vision, more unity, and more courageous leadership from its people, especially its youth.